For August 30th, we're talking about significant naval engagements. Yes, you get two for the price of one here. You get the Vlieter incident in 1799 and the beginning of the Battle of Lake Poyang in 1363. And some of you may be thinking, wait a minute, you're kind of scraping the bottom of the gun barrel here. Where do you get this stuff? And the answer is, I get it from lists of commonly recognized significant historical events. So let's start with the Vlieter incident. It's part of the Anglo-Russian invasion of Holland during the Napoleonic Wars. And that might not sound like a great idea, and in fact it didn't work out very well. But they did succeed in capturing the entire Dutch fleet. We're talking 632 guns, 3,700 men. As a matter of fact, the Dutch fleet was not at all keen on the French Revolutionary cause, and when they were sent out to fight the English, they mutinied and surrendered instead. And this had a significant impact on world history because the Dutch fleet was actually very important at that time. France lacked a really adequate navy. They knew if they wanted to conquer the world and impose their vision of liberté, égalité, fraternité, and the alternative of death, they would need to take on the British. They would need to wrest control of the seas from Britannia, the dream of tyrants since Philip II. And so it mattered that they were frustrated. Trafalgar, in some sense, derives from the Vlieter incident. And it's enormously important to world history that Napoleon didn't win the Napoleonic Wars, that once again the free people somehow snatched victory from the jaws of defeat, including, of course, at Waterloo. And then you get the Battle of Lake Poyang. This is claimed to have been the largest naval engagement to that point in history. They say 800,000 men took part. It went on for well over a month. I think we can regard the figures with the sort of skepticism we also attribute to accounts of ancient battles in the classic Greek and especially the Roman and especially the Greek world. The figures tend to be a little bit inflated. Or perhaps the Song of Roland, you know, they sang a song of many more men than were there at the time. But who's ever heard of the Battle of Lake Poyang? Now you may say no one's ever heard of the Vlieter incident, but you've heard of the Napoleonic Wars. Apparently part of the outcome of this battle was to ensure the victory of the Ming dynasty when the Yuan dynasty fell apart. And the Ming dynasty gave China a period of relative peace and stability, but of no enormous geopolitical significance. It is actually true that under the Ming, the Chinese did manage to defeat the Dutch, but they defeated the Dutch in the waters of East Asia. The Dutch kept Indonesia. I mean, and no offense to Holland, but it's kind of a small, damp place known for tulips and windmills. How could it be a global power in the 17th century and even into the 19th century? How could its fleet matter in strategic calculations? And China, despite the magnificence of its cultural achievements and the apparent size of the Battle of Lake Poyang, wind up being carved up by European powers who happened not to include the Dutch, but did even include the Portuguese. Again, with no knock on Portugal, it's not exactly a world-bestriding colossus. There is such a huge difference between the dynamism of the open societies of the West and the difficulty that all other traditional societies have in dealing with the impact of the West, military, economic, and cultural, that the Dutch fleet and the Vlieter incident matters far more than this Chinese engagement in the Battle of Lake Poyang. As has been suggested, including by one prominent Chinese dissident, modernization means westernization. And when you weigh these two incidents in the scale, and the Vlieter incident goes and the Battle of Lake Poyang goes whee, you understand that the history of the West is the one that really matters. The history of the open societies, the question of liberty and whether it yields dynamism or disorder is the critical one, not merely for those societies that happen to be located physically in the West, but for everybody all over the world. If you're enjoying It Happened Today, please visit my website, that's johnrobson.ca, and make a contribution to help sustain my work generally and this feature in particular. If you want, you can mark it and say, this is so that It Happened Today can continue, and we will take note of that because we are very much crowd-driven in what we do.